Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first workshop in the Department of Economic and Community Development's free summer workshop series, Ready, Set, Grow, What You Should Know About Human Resources to Prepare for Your Company's Growth, presented by Ms. Veronica L. Matthews. She is the President and CEO of VLM Coaching and Consultant Services. Before we start tonight, I just have a few housekeeping notes. Thank you so much, Ms. Veronica, for coming out and presenting at our first free workshop tonight. We have 2 other free workshops coming up this summer on August 9th as well as August 16th. For more information about economic and community development events, please visit our Facebook page at Laurel ECD. There are also flyers for all our upcoming events at the table in the rear. Please hold all your questions to the end of the recording, and then you can go to the back of the room to ask them, and then Ms. Veronica will answer any questions that you may have. This workshop is also being recorded and will be uploaded to the Laurel TV's YouTube channel for you to view at a later date. We can make the PowerPoint presentation available online as well. Other than that, we will get started. Ms. Veronica. No problem.
Thank you, Christian, for having me. It's my pleasure to be here and to support you. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm also a roamer, so if I roam and you lose the hearing, let me know, and I'll definitely come back to the mic. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy evening in order to come and learn about human resources. Human resources is a passion of mine, and I want to be able to educate small businesses so that they don't run into challenges and get in trouble with the IRS and the Department of Labor in how they run their business. So this is typically, I do this in an informal capacity where questions are taken as we go along, but we'll hold the questions for the end, and that way that'll ensure that we can get through the material in an hour, and then I look forward to entertaining your questions at the end. So I usually start by asking, it was working, maybe because I was so close. Okay, there we go. There. So this is a little bit about me, just in case you say, who is she and why is she presenting and what gives her the authority to be able to present this information to us. So I am a senior certified HR professional, and I have both the certifications from SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, as well as the Human Resources Certification Institute. I am also a certified life coach, life leadership and executive coach, certified through the Accomplishment Coaching. And I am an auntie, even though I don't have any children of my own. These are my nieces and great nieces. And then I am a former line dance instructor. So that's just kind of a little bit of tidbit about me. But I have 24 years of human resources experience and about 14 years of coaching experience. So I coach to the person and not necessarily a particular business or particular area. I just basically support the person in whatever endeavors they have for their life. So the next slide I usually ask, what is it that you'd like? But these are what I wanted to talk about. I figured we'd define human resources. We talk about the employee life cycle. We'll talk about what HR support is available through various sources. Then, and when you get ready to get set, we want to identify your growth plan and how HR fits in that. And when you should call in the big guns, when it's time for you to, as you go forward, when you need specific HR support. And then when it's ready for you to grow, we're going to talk about actually progressing steps through the human resources process. So that is what I thought that we were. So is there anything that anybody wanted to away from today that was not covered? Not, then maybe it'll come up at the end. So we'll go through the material. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is so if you've been an employee at any one point in time before you started your own business, you probably had a human resources manager in the company that you worked for, the size it was. And so the human resources is just basically the department, the person, or the systems that manage your most important asset, which is your people. And it's the opportunity for you to get that support. And so the employee life cycle is basically just like any systems IT people in here. So the IT process goes through a particular life cycle. And the employee life cycle is very similar to that in that you start at a certain point and you run through the process. You usually start with the recruitment process, and then you get in the door. Then you go with onboarding, and then you go through the development process, learning about what your responsibilities are, what your position is, and then you'll follow through with the retention, kind of keeping you there, and then finally the separation process. And so all through the process, you're going through the engagement process as well, because you want to be engaged and connected to the organization and to your work as you go through the process. So when it comes to the set part, so that was part of the ready process. So that's getting ready for understanding what HR is. Now we're going to move into the set process. So the set process, the first thing you want to do is to create a plan. And so when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so the plan really gets you ready and gets you set for what's coming. And so in that process, I recommend, and this is no particular science, but it's just my recommendation, to set up, 6-month, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plans of how you want your business to flow, so that when you know that you no longer have the bandwidth to cover what you are responsible for, then that's when you want to start bringing on people. In addition, the plan pretty much lets you know when you should start bringing in consultants to be able to help you out as well, because not everybody is good with numbers. So you might need to have a consultant to come in and do your QuickBooks. Not everybody is good with marketing and development, business development. So you might want to have a consultant to come in and help you with that. And then when you get to the part where you have employees coming in, that's when you also want to reach out to an HR professional to be able to help you to figure out at what point you need to bring in the people and at what you want them to do. And so once you have a framework and an idea and a vision for your company and how you want to grow, the next thing you want to do is define the roles of the people that you want to be able to support you. So at whatever stage, what specifically do you want them to do? This helps you in a way so that you do not get to the point where you're asking for one person to do have all the skills and the whole kit and caboodle in one person. And that keeps you from putting all your eggs in one basket. So you want to be able to identify those individuals that can complement the skills that you already have. A lot of people first start off with a virtual assistant. And a virtual assistant basically is someone that can help to manage the calendar, manage appointments with the client, manage the customer relationship management system, the CRM, and manage those ancillary services that can help a person focus on the business. And so when you bring in a human resources professional, you're basically saying that my business is to, to educate people on finances. And my business is to build computers, or my business is whatever. That's your specialty. Your specialty is not necessarily the people. And so that's where developing the plan, defining the roles, you can identify at what point you need to bring in the people and what you need them to do. And so the natural tendency that a lot of companies have when they first start off is that they hire people as 1099. And that's fine. And I want you to, though, understand that there are potential risks with that, because the IRS has a classification. They have a checklist that is on their website. And basically it says independent contractor meets these particular responsibilities. Usually they're a separate entity. They have their own TIN number, tax identification number. They have their own organizational name. It's not necessarily, Joe Blow doing business as. It is a particular company name. And then there are certain criteria that they have to meet as well, where they bring their own equipment, they have their own training, they already have the skills and expertise, and then they're coming to basically provide that service to you. So they're rendering a service or they're giving you a product, and they're able to bring their own equipment and their own services, and they pretty much provide a service to you and then send you an invoice for that service. So they're not necessarily looking for pay every week or every 2 weeks, unless that's how the contract is arranged. But there is a specific contract associated with their work as well. And so you know that there are dangers in having a contract for an employee, because then that's locked into certain criteria, and that if the terms of the contract are not met appropriately, then the employee can then sue on the basis of the contract is not necessarily met. So that conflicts directly with the at-will agreement that many states have, that basically says that either the company or the employee are free to separate the relationship at any time for any reason, with or without notice. That basically is what the at-will clause means. And when you have a contract, you're in violation of that at-will. So the at-will basically the contract handcuffs you from the liberty of the time and any reason in letting a person go. But when you have an independent contractor, you basically have a contract that spells out what they're going to provide for you, what you're going to provide for them in return, which is usually maybe a place within your workspace to work, and then the money in return for the services that they provide. And so when you have a person that you're telling them what time to come in and what time to leave, that they can leave, when you have a set schedule for them, when you're giving them the tasks that they should do, either in the form a formal plan or day-to-day direction, if you're basically managing their performance and letting them know how well they're performing and letting them know when their deliverables are due, that's an employee. And so if you have a person that you want to basically have more control over, that's when you want to reach for and move in the direction of hiring an employee. But if you want that person to have free reign and just support you from a distance, like maybe a QuickBooks contractor or a person that's going to outsource and service your IT on an as-needed basis, then you can hire that individual as an independent contractor. And so anybody can do whatever they want to do. I just want you to know the risk involved if you choose to have a person that is performing in the capacity of an employee, but is classified as an independent contractor. In your mind, you run the risk of that person, if they don't have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed, maybe they are just laid off and you run into them and they say, oh yeah, I can do that service for you. And then you pay them through their social security number instead of their TIN. They don't pay their taxes. They get hit with a big tax bill when they do their taxes. And then they say, oh, wait a minute. I was working for that company and I should have been an employee instead of an independent contractor. And if you did not have a contract that specified the relationship as it existed between you and that particular individual, then they do have a right to say, you owe me for the taxes that you should have paid taxes on my behalf, and that I didn't have an opportunity to pay taxes through payroll, and therefore the reason why I'm in this predicament is all your fault. And so if you're willing to accept those risks, then go ahead and hire the person as an independent contractor. If you're not and you want to do things above board, then select them as an employee. So I think we have to wait until the end, yeah. So as you're a small business getting started, there are several ways in which you can engage someone as an HR support for your business. The typical way that individuals work is through an as-needed basis, a retainer basis, basically. And so you would pay them a flat fee in a month for a certain number of hours, and they would basically establish your infrastructure or be a sounding board for them, and you would answer the questions as they come up. Or you can have someone that you have a relationship with and say, you're running through things on your own and you just want to call that person up on an as-needed basis. You can also hire someone on a part-time basis. I don't recommend that you really need that until you get to the point where you have at least 10 employees. If you're running at 3, 4, 5 employees, you can probably work in on either an as-needed basis or a retainer agreement with one of your HR outsource agents. And then when you get a big wig and you don't really want to necessarily have HR in-house, but you do have a number of employees and you want to be able to manage that, there are things called professional employee organizations that you can contract with them. And the only thing you do is hire the person. They take care of everything else, performance management, payroll, and everything else. All their systems are available to you through that arrangement. That usually will run you a good anywhere between 100 to, sometimes depending upon your benefits and all of that, anywhere between $100 and $1,500 a month per employee, in addition to your payroll. Because they capture everything for you. They capture your benefit. They capture the systems that you need for enrolling the people. They capture that. They help you out with performance management systems. So you're basically paying for the services that they have available. So now we're moving into the grow phase. So when we move into the grow phase, as I mentioned with the employee life cycle, the first thing that comes up is recruitment. And even within recruitment, there's a life cycle. So the recruitment life cycle usually begins with the plan that you had way back when you started with your 6-month, your 1-year plan, and the description of what you wanted the person to do. So the recruitment process really begins with the need and the position description. And once you have those two things, then you're usually going to put the position out on the street. And there are a couple of ways to do that. There's job boards, there's Indeed. If you have your own individual website, if you were to post your position on your website, Indeed does this thing where they will scrape all the business websites and look for career opportunities, and they'll automatically post it on Indeed for you. So you don't even have to contact Indeed at all. They take care of that for you. And then if you want to, though, search for candidates via the Indeed platform, then you'd have to enter into a contract relationship with them. And there are various ways in which to do that. But if you just want to post it and get it out to the public, Indeed is a good way to make that happen. Glassdoor is also a good way to make that happen. And then you probably hear the commercials for ZipRecruiter. I'm not wedded to any one system, but those are job boards that are available to you. Once you get the position posted out on the street, you want to start thinking about, when I get this person in front of me, whether I'm looking at their resume or I'm ready to screen them, what kind of questions do I want to ask them? And then you want to make sure that you're asking legally defensible questions. So you cannot ask questions about a person's race, creed, color, sexual orientation. You can't ask questions about their marital status. You can't ask questions about their plans to have kids. You can't ask questions about their transportation. You can only ask questions that are related to the position that they're going to be performing. And so human resources support as you go through this process is pretty important, so that you don't run into trouble and ask the wrong question. Because we are in a very litigious society. People are very well educated, and they'll know when they've been asked an illegal question. And then the first thing they're going to do is go to the Prince George's County Human Relations Commission and file a complaint. So want to make sure that you keep your information legal and above board, and that you're asking the right question. So I recommend doing pre-screen. So pre-screens is when you call a person, you make an arrangement to talk with them over the phone first. And then this gives you an opportunity to kind of ask the preliminary question. Do you, what interests you about this position? Why are you looking for a new position? Were you fired from any one of your previous jobs? Okay, why did you move from this job to that job? And talk with them about what their work experience is. Then once you're comfortable with that, then you can move to the next phase, which could possibly be a lot of people are doing Zoom or Skype interviews. And you can even do your preliminary interview via Skype or via Zoom. Zoom is another video management tool in which you can actually have a face-to-face conversation with a person, but over video. And so once you have the screening process out of the way, then you want to think about bringing the person in so you can lay eyes on them in person. And that and this is not for the purpose of scrutinizing them or rejecting them. This is for the purpose of you making sure that you're comfortable in their presence, they're comfortable in your presence, and that they have the right representation of you to your clients and to the public. Because usually if you have a service organization or you have a product or a product that you sell, that person is going to be representing you in one capacity or another, whether it's customer service in the back office and answering phone, or whether it's sales on the front side, communicating directly with the public. So you want to make sure that this person has your mission, vision, and values in mind. They represent that, and that they would represent your organization well. And then once you get to the interview process, the next phase usually is to narrow down the candidate. And then you can use various ways in which to run through the process of picking the person that you want. And then this is up for debate. But the next process I would recommend go through is to, once you select the person, give them an offer. Then you can go through the process of the background investigation. And so background investigations are optional. They're not required. However, if you have people that are going to be working with your people and working with your money, you may want to do a background check just to make sure that they don't have any convictions for exactly what you fear that they may want to try to do for you. So, and it's just a fail-safe opportunity. So it's post-offer, pre-employment. So you've made the decision, you selected this individual, and you've given them an offer of employment. And then now you want to then check their background before they start. Because usually a person is working somewhere else, and then they have a 2 weeks notice that they usually want to give. And then during that time, you can run a background check. Background checks run anywhere from the short side of maybe $18, $20, all the way up to the Cadillac version of $45 that includes everything. The basic version that you would want is a 7-year criminal history records check and a sex offender registry check. You can also, and then in addition to that, that includes usually a local check for the state that you're in, and they'll run their addresses for the last 7 years of the places that they've lived. And then I would say if a person is operating in your human resources area and dealing with birth dates of birth and social security numbers, or they're in your accounting department and finance and handling your money, you might want to consider also running a credit check. Now, both the background investigation, the criminal history background investigation, and the credit check are governed by the Fair Credit Reporting Act. There are certain standards that you must have and certain standards that you must follow with regards to notification and also for safeguarding the information that you obtain and not using the information for nefarious purposes. So once you secure a background check company, they will actually check you out to make sure that you have a bona fide reason for conducting this and that you're just not a crazy person that's stalking somebody. And so they want to, because they want to protect themselves too. And they will they'll run a check on you. They'll ask you for maybe your record, your financial record, the number of employees you have, and they'll just make sure that you're on the up and up before they enter in a relationship with you. And then once you are in that relationship at contract, they'll make sure that you're doing what you are supposed to do, because the federal government can come back on them if they are in contract with someone that is not following the right policies and procedures. And once you do the background check, the person starts, you're ready to move into the next phase, which is onboarding. Okay, so onboarding basically is a chance for the new person coming in, for you to introduce them to who you are as a company, what you represent. So your vision, mission, and values. You want them to understand what your company stands for as far as your representation in the community, what's important to you as far as in your relationship with them as an employee. So what the company's mission is, what the vision is for the organization, whether you want to grow and serve all of Maryland, or you want to serve the nation, or you want to serve the world. You know, what's your vision for your organization? And then what values do you have? What's important to you as far as collaboration, teamwork, or profit? You know, so what is important to you, and what balance is there in that? You also want to introduce the person to the team that they're going to be working with. The team might just be you. The team could be you and your clients. The team could be you and other contractors. So whomever it is, you want to introduce the individual to their team that they're going to be working with. You want to introduce them also to the facilities that they're going to be working in. Show them where the break room is, if any, where the kitchen is, where they can put their lunch if they bring it, where the restrooms are. Make sure that that you're prepared for them before they come in. So set up their computer in advance. Make sure that they have a clean workspace, that they have a pad and a pen, and that you are welcoming them into your space, right? So it's kind of like if you entertain at home, when a person comes to your home, you show them, oh yeah, you can put your dish here, you can put your coat there, you can put the restrooms are here. It's just the same thing with an employee. So if you're prepared for them to come in, that leaves such a lasting impression on them. And it really lets them know that you care, that you really value them as an employee, and you want to get this employee-employer relationship off to the right start. And your investment in the onboarding, it doesn't take a lot. Once you set it up once, it's pretty much a system that kind of runs from there. But once you invest in that process and really put some time and attention into that, then it really makes a difference when the person comes forward. And then you also want to introduce the person to your policies and procedures and practices. So the handbook is usually at this point what you want to show them and what you want to get them to sign off on. and what you want to have them to familiarize themselves with, because this is basically the employee handbook is basically the rules of the road for working at your organization, what you expect of them and what they can expect from you as an employer. And so you want to introduce them to all of these aspects when they first come in. I recommend an onboarding process that is not just a full day of pumping information into them, but that it lasts over a period of time. So whether if you can do it in the form that it's 60 days or 90 days, it gives the person an opportunity to get settled within your organization and really determine, because usually the first 90 days, a lot of companies like to call it a probationary period. We really don't use that term anymore. We use more so introductory period. So it's an opportunity for them to figure out, did I make the right choice? And it's an opportunity for you to say, did I make the right choice? So within that period of time, you're continuing to introduce them to things, to their work responsibilities, to your performance management expectations, to how you are as a leader. And once you continue to give them that information over a period of time, it actually makes a more lasting impression. And then at the end, get their feedback. God bless you. Get their feedback on how they thought the process worked for them. What was missing? What was too much? What was too little? And then once you get them involved in that particular process and start, once they see that you're interested in their opinion and that you value what they have to say, then that really starts the ball rolling for continuing to make a lasting impression. And we talked earlier, I mentioned, we didn't talk too much about it, but retention. Retention is once you invest your time, your energy, you've gone through the process with this individual, you've really invested a lot of time, you want them to stay with you for as long as the relationship works. Now, I didn't say as long as possible. I said as long as the relationship works. If they're giving you the services that you need and you're giving them the development and support that they need, usually the relationship will work a long time. However, there are certain situations where we all make bad hires and we, kind of have to cut the cord when it makes sense. So when you pour in development to an individual and you get you start collaborating with them, you get their opinions, and you really value them as an employee, then that makes a huge difference. And usually your employee-employer relationship will continue to thrive. And so we're still in the growth phase. The person has been hired, the person has been onboarded, and the working relationship is going well. You want to let them know what you expect of them as far as their performance goes. And you want them to know, so basically when you are looking at a performance management system, you want to know the who, what, when, where, and why. And basically it's the who's going to be involved. If this is your first employee, obviously the only person going to be involved in the process is you. So they can make their self-evaluation of how they feel that they've performed, and then really it's going to be you evaluating them. Then you want to define when you want that to happen. So how frequently? I recommend the last bullet point is communicate regularly and often. And I recommend that you talk with your employees. If you can do it once a month, just have a quick 15 minutes check-in. How's it going? What do you need? What's working? What's not? That clues you in to what's going on, and it keeps you informed so that no surprises happen for either party, for either the employee or for you. And then if you cannot do it monthly, work schedules don't permit too much work, at least do it quarterly. Have a sit down with the person to talk about goals, talk about how they're tracking on what it is they're performing, what they're doing well, what they could use additional support with, and what they could improve upon. And so this helps as you go along so that there are no surprises when you decide to do the evaluation, usually once a year. Some companies do it every 6 months, Every 6 months is a lot for a formal written evaluation process. However, you can still have those frequent check-in meetings, and they still are just as effective as when you sit down to write. And it makes it even easier if you have an annual process. If you have those regular check-ins every quarter, then you just collect your notes from those, and it helps you write your annual performance evaluation, and you're all set. You're good to go. You want to know a why, and why is usually, what are you doing it for? What is the purpose of you doing a performance evaluation? Are you doing it for the purpose of giving them money? Are you doing it for the purpose of just letting them know, just to make sure to give yourself the assurance that they're performing well? Are you doing it for the purpose of wasting paper? So once you identify your why for doing it, it makes it a lot more effective. And therefore, you can combine it with your vision, mission, and values. So it's like, what are your core values for your work, for your company? And include those in your performance evaluation so you can ensure that the person definitely represents you in the best capacity, and they're in line with what it is that you're expecting now. And then the outcome is usually either a raise or a bonus. However, I don't always recommend it being tied to the specific time period that you're giving it. So like if you're doing an annual evaluation from January to December, maybe make the raise effective in March so that it is not a carrot that you're dangling over the course of the year for them to be able to perform well, so that they're performing well all year long, and then they just get the money at a different time. So it's not like the angst and anxiety as associated with the actual evaluation. And then they say, oh, well, I got a 5 on my evaluation. How come I only got $1 raise? And then it's like, okay, well, they're not mutually exclusive. You know, you didn't get a 5, but because you are going to get a specific amount of money. And it helps to keep things a little cleaner, and it helps with your explanation of maybe the budget doesn't be able to support a full raise. Even though they're performing excellently, your budget just only supports a certain amount. So so the point that I want you to walk away with from this is, when you have a performance management system, you want to be able to communicate regularly and often. Let the person know as well as you can how they're performing and what it is that they're doing well, and where it is that they can improve. And so benefits is a big area, of course. You know, with the Affordable Care Act, that is a mandate that employers of a certain size, and I will specify that, of a certain size, should offer medical and health and welfare benefits for their employees. There's a slew of other benefits that you can offer. So I'm not advocating any particular benefit, but let's say you just have that one person, and maybe you're not in a position to be able to offer medical care. Maybe they have a spouse and are able to get medical care through their spouse. Then you can offer other ancillary benefits to be able to complement that. So if you've ever heard of, I'm not pushing anything, but if you've ever heard of AFLAC, AFLAC is a complement to medical benefit. It offers the employee stopgap coverage for anything that happens, like if they're sick. The AFLAC will send them checks for particular reasons, and AFLAC will also cover, they've expanded it to cover cancer, catastrophic illnesses, and the like. So that is a good benefit. It doesn't cost you anything. The only thing that you do is run it through your payroll so that they can have a pre-tax deduction for that. But it doesn't cost you anything, and it is a benefit that really goes a long way. A lot of employees appreciate that. Another benefit that goes a long way that doesn't cost you anything is Legal Shield. So if a person is in a situation and they want to be able to have access to an attorney for whatever reason through purchasing Legal Shield, and again, the only thing you do is set it up and run it through your payroll as an after-tax benefit, and then they have access to that particular service. So even if you are not in a position and you are small enough that you don't necessarily want to have want to carry medical benefits at that point, you can offer other alternatives. Another one is maybe to communicate with the gym down the street and say, hey, if my employees are interested, will you be able to set up a discount program for them? And so those are things that you can be creative and out the box to let the person know that you care about their total well-being and not just when they're with you from 9 to 5. Other benefits that you can have is time off, paid time off. Now, a lot of people think that it's a requirement to be paid for a holiday and to be paid for vacation. The Maryland law does not say that. The Maryland says you have to offer it, but then if you choose to pay for it, then that's a bonus. So that's a benefit. And oftentimes, a lot of companies will do a total compensation statement, which is basically not only the person's pay and the taxes that you pay on their behalf, the benefits that you offer them, and the training that you offer them, which basically takes a person that makes $50,000 all in total. Once you add in all those benefits, their total compensation package working with you ends up being something like maybe $62,000 because of those investments that you've made on their behalf. And so by thinking of these out-of-the-box creative opportunities for benefit, then you're able to offer that to your employee. And another one that might not be listed here is an employee assistance program. That is huge, and that actually helps out a lot. So there are various providers where you can make arrangements, and it usually is in conjunction with a benefit plan, but it's a separate provider. And what that gives the person is opportunities to have access to mental health benefit and also to financial assistance. Basically, it's an opportunity that if they need help with finding childcare, elder care, if they need help with relocating and finding support for building a deck on their back, there's a huge amount of services that are available through the employee assistance program. And I don't expect you to know this, so this is where you would get an HR professional involved, so you can be advised on what is available and what you can offer to make your company as attractive as possible. Because, unless you're hiring your relative that almost feels obligated to work with you because they want to help out your vision, you want to make yourself an attractive employer to the general public, to make them want to be able to apply for your position, to give yourself the most advantage to hire someone that's going to complement your company in the best light. And so there's competition out there. And so you're not the only company that's recruiting for their talent. And so they have options. And when you structure your recruiting process and your onboarding process and your performance management process and your benefits process, your compensation, when you structure all that in a winning proposal, it really makes your company that much more attractive. And so we know that sometimes relationships end amicably. People are and get to the point where they say, I have learned as much as I possibly can at this particular time, and I think it's time for me to move on. I work part-time in an organization, and the chief executive officer's assistant, he considers that a 2-year position because he wants to hire someone that is usually not too far out of undergrad, and is then ready for their first assignment. They're ready to get their hands dirty, learn as much as they possibly can, and then usually they're ready for grad school in 2 years. And so not everybody thinks of their positions in that way. And so some people, when you get hired with their organization, they expect you to stay as long as possible. And again, I recommend they stay as long as the relationship works. And so when the relationship doesn't work, then whether it's a voluntary or involuntary termination. Voluntary termination, that means that this person has decided on their own, without any help from you, that their time needs to be ended at your organization. Involuntary just means that you have made that decision for them. And involuntary also means that the decision was made with your recommendation that they then move on to another organization. So whether it's voluntary, whether it's involuntary, you want to make sure that you follow the right practices. Now, I mentioned something before called at will. And a lot of people mistake at will for just being able to say, oh, I don't like that person, I want to terminate them. I want to get rid of them. And that is not a very wise decision, because a person, if they don't understand the reasons why you've let them go, they have every right to go to the Prince George's Human Services and also to the EEOC. And then it becomes your obligation to defend yourself for the reason that you terminated them. So if you don't have the proper documentation, if you don't have the proper reasoning, you can put yourself in a very sticky situation. So if you are in a situation where a person is not performing, they're not meeting your standards, and you really want to separate the relationship, I recommend you either involve a human resources professional or an attorney, just to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed and you're protected, because what you don't know could hurt you. And as I mentioned, we live in a very litigious society. So if a person decides that they key in on a specific thing that you said and they blow it out of proportion, then they have a right to go and file a complaint, and then you're on the hook to defend yourself. And that process is very lengthy and it's very time consuming, because I've been through a couple. And you just want to make sure that you have yourself protected for that particular instance. So, putting it all together, you're a small business owner, as I mentioned, or you're thinking about being a small business owner, or maybe you just were required to be here, whatever the situation is. I recommend that your expertise lies in the business that you have and not necessarily with HR. So I recommend don't try HR yourself. It's not one of the areas that really makes a good decision for you to try to figure things out on your own. So once you get to the point and you recognize where you are in your set plan, and you start doing your strategic plan for your business, then when you figure out that you need HR support, reach out to a professional that can give you a consultation to help guide you through the process. So you don't necessarily have to have an HR department with 5 employees. You can still run things with a person of an HR support providing you support from a distance. So you don't necessarily have to have that person on site, but you just want to make sure that you are doing things according to law and best practice. And then you want to consider getting legal support as well. So I mentioned Legal Shield. Legal Shield is good for you as a business owner as well, because then you have access to an attorney and you don't necessarily have to pay the huge fee associated with that. And again, I'm not recommending anything particular, but it's just good advice. And so what's next for you? As you're going through your process and you're identifying that you're ready to grow and you're getting set with doing your plan, then the next thing is to assess what it is that you need. And then when you know what it is that you need, reach out for support at the appropriate time. And then once you start to go through the planning process and you start implementing, then you want to evaluate and monitor things as you go along. And so, any questions at this point?
Thank you so much for a great presentation.
Thank you.
And so I have a couple questions. Number one, you mentioned about questions that cannot be asked. Is there a list somewhere of those questions, or is that just something that when we talk to an HR person that they automatically know?
Yes. If you were to go to the Department of Labor, they will have a section for hiring, and they have the list of taboo subjects that you cannot ask about.
Okay. And another thing, if an employee dresses what the employer would consider inappropriate, is that something that's grounds for dismissal, or is that something that in our legally sensitive world that we live in, pretty much an employer cannot control?
Oh, no. So when I mentioned before the employee handbook is basically the rules of the road of what not only the employee can expect of your organization, but what you expect of that employee. And usually within the handbook, you will talk about work hours. You will talk about core hours. You will talk about appropriate dress. You will talk about behavior. You will talk about various things. You'll also talk about equal employment opportunities, and you'll talk about performance management. So you'll basically talk about from when they get in the door all the way through every step of the process of their employment, and then all the way through exiting. So the handbook is basically as an employer, it is your guidelines of what you expect for that, how you expect that person to behave as your employee representative. And so if you find that if you have a handbook, and I do recommend that you do, if you have a handbook and it's defined what the dress code is, whatever behavior standards are addressed in the handbook, and a person does violate that, you also want to include the disciplinary procedures that should be followed in the event that a person violates a work rule. And when they violate the work rule, you can do anything from have a written warning to process through a verbal warning. Start with a counseling, verbal warning, and proceed through a written warning, and then finally either suspension or termination. So you can follow a particular process to advise the person that they have violated one of your work rules, and then what the consequences are for violating that.
Okay, great. I think I had a couple more. I have to look. You mentioned the at-will rule, and you did mention it a couple times, but I think I still need a little clarification on that. So does this only work for employer relationships, or does this apply to independent contractor and employer relationships?
Good question. So what governs an independent contractor relationship is the contract. So the contract has the scope of work, what the person is expected to do for you, what services, what products, whatever. It also talks about their performance, and that if they're not performing satisfactory, what happens. It also talks about the termination of the contract. And so because they have a contract that governs their work with you, they're not subject to the at-will arrangement. The at-will arrangement is just for employees. And what that means is basically the employee, or you as the employer, can terminate the arrangement, the work agreement at any time, with or without notice, and with or without reason. And my caution is, though, have a sound reason and have a sound process for dismissing an employee, because it could come back to bite you if it's not if something was violated.
So it's with or without reason and with or without notice.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so what usually comes up is in your handbook, you'll have that there is a 2-week notice required for separation, for voluntary termination. And a person then so the at-will agreement basically just says that you can have that as a standard, but the person doesn't necessarily have to follow it because they're still at will. However, if they've signed another document that basically says that at this level of employee, you are required to, you understand that my expectations of you are that you give a specific amount of notice, and they sign that document separately, then that is defensible. That is something that you can have a standard for, that when they are ready to leave your organization, they have to give you that amount of notice because they've signed that.
Great. And one last question. And the last question deals with, you mentioned a virtual,
the pre-screen for the doing it by video.
Let's see.
Oh,
a virtual assistant.
Yes.
Yes. And at what point, of course, that could probably be done very early on in the business as well. Mm-hmm. And where's a good place to find that, or is that something that an HR person does as well?
Not this HR person, but let me see. Usually HR people don't get into the virtual assistant world. However, a virtual assistant, there are varying degrees of virtual assistant. Some virtual assistants will do not only your calendar management, they'll also communicate with your clients and set up your appointments. They'll also manage your social media. They'll manage your contract. So there are varying degrees of skill sets and services that various virtual assistants offer. You can, I actually know a couple people actually, the young lady that's presenting next Thursday falls into that category where she does CPA work as well as she's a virtual assistant. So, and then I have a couple of other resources, but it depends upon what your needs are. You can then either connect with someone and find out, hey, do you know a virtual assistant can provide these services? Or you can Google it. Or, I have a couple of contacts. So if you want to let me know, then I'll be able to provide you that information. But a virtual assistant can be, usually when you're getting started, you want to do everything on your own. And while it gives you the control over what's going on in your organization, it may not always be healthy for you to burn the candles at both ends and try to accomplish everything. So a virtual assistant is a way in which you can have support for what it is that you're doing in your business and you're just getting started. So as I mentioned, when you identify that your bandwidth no longer can support the work that you have to do, that the work that's in front of you, then you want to solicit the support of a specialist that will be able to provide you the support that you need. And virtual assistants, as I mentioned, they cover a gamut of expertise to social media and calendar management, as well as customer relation management.
Thank you. You answered that question. I guess I was wondering, does an HR person help to get a virtual assistant?
I'm
so yes.
Sorry.
So yes. I didn't phrase it right.
I mean, it depends. That it's not necessarily an employee relationship. However, you might have someone, like I would help one of my clients identify a virtual assistant if they need it.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Any other questions? Don't be shy. So, it has my contact information. I have a card, and then there's another slide with me. Yep. That's my contact information. So if you have any questions, you want to get started, you want to talk over a plan, or you just want to kind of get clarification on anything that was mentioned here that is a little bit more sensitive, then feel free to reach out to me, and I would love to be able to support you. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews, for coming out tonight for our first workshop on HR. I appreciate you coming out and speaking with us, and I thank everyone for coming out. Everyone have a great evening and get home safely.